will begin with roll call. Don Davenport.
Here.
Mark Ducey.
Here.
Sean Kennedy.
Here.
Michelle Boudreaux here. If you would please stand. Mark will lead us in the pledge. Oh my gosh. I got you, Mark.
I got you.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm so sorry.
Now we'll have Mark whistle.
Now Mark will whistle.
All right, so we are going to discuss the latest feedback and new developments from DESI and the proposed amendment of the regional agreement.
Thank you very much. This is very hot off the press. We had this meeting about 4 hours ago, and it was to get some reactions to the 3 pieces of feedback that the planning committee had for DESI on the last version of the agreement. The first of which has to do with section 1A1, which involves weighted voting. As Mr. Davenport pointed out, the regional agreement has called for weighted voting since the beginning. And so it might be more expedient to make as limited a change to that language as possible. So I asked basically what is the minimum that we need to do in order to pass muster with them. And they said if we could just add a sentence that reflects the current voting weights. So if you look at the very last sentence on page 1, that was added as of a couple of hours ago. The second member should have an apostrophe too, so I'll fix that. But it simply says, so in place of all the other language that we had in prior versions, as of April 15th, 2025, each Hamden member's vote is 12.5%, and each Wilbraham member's vote is 15%. So that's the first item. The second item had to do with why DESI staffers are recommending that terms of the current leases be included in the agreement instead of being incorporated by reference in section 4C. Yeah. And so there's no change there from the last version. The response that they gave is referencing, let's see, 4C.
The new C. Oh, new C, page 6.
4C, read page 6, yeah. So we have some language from the actual lease agreements in here now, and the question was, could we just reference the lease agreements? And one of the things that they gave direction on was by directing us to Chapter 71, Section 14C, which explicitly says that rental and license fees in terms of assessment need to be listed in the regional agreement. Since some of these sections that are related to the leases reflect capital assessments that then go back into the assessments to the towns, that's why this portion of the law is activated, and that's why they say we need to spell out anything that's going to and have an impact on assessment in this section. And while I'm speaking of this, also in this section, item B on page 6, we did ask for clarification of the $5,000 capital cost regulation, specifically whether it was permissive or whether it was restrictive. And the response that we got was that while we may not adopt a different definition of capital costs from the one described in the regulation, which is that any item of cost of more than $5,000 and a lifespan of more than a year is a capital cost and must be treated as a capital cost, we can have language that says that that we're going to treat capital costs however we want to. So for example, we could have language that says capital projects less than a certain amount will be the responsibility of the district. So we have some language similar to that in this version of the agreement, but we don't have the freedom to adopt a different definition of capital.
Where is that?
That is item B. It says capital
No,
costs.
I see that, but where is the additional language you're speaking?
So if you look at section C, for example, it says capital costs in excess of $35,000 for these schools will be the responsibilities of the towns.
How about Minnesota? I mean, the notion of a $5,000 capital cost is simply ridiculous, and while we may all agree to that in this room, we won't be here as long as those agreements don't take place. I guess I don't need
I'm
to
not
know
sure.
that now, John, but
Sure.
just a clarification.
Yeah, I can follow up on what it says for Chuck. But that, I mean, that would be the point you're making about other people will be doing this at a certain point, is, I think, underlies sort of the subtext of many of the pieces of feedback we're getting from DESI. It's like, be as clear as possible as you can in the agreement so that there isn't disagreements later on about what the agreement means or what it says. But again, just to clarify, just because something is a capital cost underneath the regulation doesn't mean that it will go through the town capital process. We can have language in the agreement that addresses that differently. It does mean when we make our interview report, we have to call all those things that meet this definition capital. But that doesn't necessarily affect the towns. It's more of a paperwork thing. And then the third item that we requested feedback on was whether language proposed by DESI staffers about the notice of term commencement to candidates and voters conflicts with relevant statute about what might appear on the ballot. That is going back to page 1, section A1 again, talking about the terms of the school committee members. I guess one thing that came up in our conversation is that although we've been pointed to some statutes that talk about what must appear on a ballot, those are not written in such a way as to limit any other thing from appearing on the ballot. And then one of the sections of the general law related to what must appear on the ballot is terms of the candidates. And so the terms of the candidates language opens the door for explaining that the terms will begin on July 1st. And then in addition, they had explained to us that they had recently had emails from the Secretary of State about this issue and had been given some guidance that when you have a regional committee that doesn't take office on the day after the election, that should be made clear on the ballot and to the voters and to the candidates rather. We are waiting for them to provide us with the email from the Secretary of State explaining that guidance. So those were the...
Excuse me, Don.
Sure.
I don't know how we can write a contract telling the town clerks what to put on the ballot. Yeah, I'd like to see those emails.
Yeah.
And the other thing is I've looked at a lot of different regional agreements, and a lot of them say, once the candidate is qualified, some of them say a certain date, but it's not, when I look at the ballot, it's not on the ballot. And once the candidate is qualified, what does that mean? If the person has an election, they don't go down and get sworn in for a week or 2 weeks, or if they have a recount, or does the qualification happen when it's an official ballot? Because, they have an unofficial ballot and they have an official election. So I just don't know how they can tell a town clerk to put specific things on the ballot. I know the terms of office, they always do that because people have to know that, but and the state reps don't have that, the state senators don't have that, the president doesn't have it, the congressman doesn't say it, so anyhow.
Yeah, so I just checked my email again, I haven't received that forward yet. When I do get it, I'll send it to all the members of the planning committee.
And the reason I bring it up is also, I just think the simpler we can keep the changes, the less changes, the better. You know,
And
I mean, we've been doing it this way for 10 years,
what?
right? I mean, this changed in 2015.
Yeah, we haven't
We
been,
haven't
we
really-
haven't
we've
done
done
waiting
yet.
for it either, since
So, I mean, yeah.
1956.
Yeah.
I'll
I
also,
believe I was the first year, the year that I was elected was the first year that my candidacy didn't start until the 1st of July.
That's why we know this is a mistake.
I'll just also share that they did say that if after reading what they had received from the Secretary of State, which they, I would guess characterized as sort of informal guidance. They said it wasn't an official memo, but it was in communication by email. If we want to have further review, they would be happy to submit that issue to the Secretary of State for a ruling, a more official kind of ruling. And so those were the 4 issues that we talked about today. I will share that I shared with our colleagues from DESI the framework that's being discussed for dealing with the middle school, just to see if that raised any, obvious red flags. And their guidance to us at this point was just, whatever agreement the towns and the school committee reach, just make it as clear as possible. So hopeful that will be a solution for us.
If I can,
One quick point, which the election is held, period, there's no punctuation
Got it?
sorry, if I could bring up something that hasn't been at least discussed in detail. It's kind of arisen, at least in part, from this budget season. There's some concern around the schools taking action to vote on capital projects and forcing them to the warrant, without going through a normal process. Is that part of this agreement? Does it specify in this agreement that that, in fact, is the way we're going to handle it? There is concern at the town level, at least from Wilbraham's perspective over that.
Could you explain this a little further? I'm not quite
Sure.
understanding.
So the school committee, this, whatever it was, a month ago or so, voted on their budget and forced capital items to the warrant for a minute job without town's input. And that is bothersome to some members in the town, including myself, frankly. I mean, this year it's manageable. I don't think it's a big issue, but all of a sudden, if the school committee votes to put a $2-3 million project on the warrant, where's the funding coming from? Where's this process? And so, and this is only going to get more significant as time goes on with Minnetonka, and particularly if we add the middle school to this, it will only become more of an issue. And so I think we need to understand exactly what we're signing up for. That really, we really haven't gotten into that detail before, but I think it's something we need to deal with up front.
So I would direct everyone's attention to page 9, budget. The language in budget isn't changing much at all. The current proposed language is before March 15th of each year, the school committee shall propose and after required public hearing approved by 2/3 vote of the full committee, a budget containing all proposed operating expenditures, capital expenditures, and debt service to be paid from the general revenues of the district for the ensuing fiscal year, blah, blah, blah. So that language about the school committee passing both the operating budget and capital budget is not new, that is, and not changed, that is from your original agreement.
Michelle, didn't we present all the changes that we wanted to make to the subcommittee, at least 2 times, right? Once we were in the Thornton Burgess Library, and I believe once we were here. right? And we had people from Wilbraham come and we reviewed all of our capital expenditures with them. And they wanted us to reprioritize them. We prioritized them, gave them back to them. We gave them the list of all the things that we wanted, but I think we settled on these and we brought it to them. I don't understand why it's a big surprise when they had it months before we put it on our actual budget. Can you help me remember that?
I remember our meeting where we did meet with capital to review the capital items and discuss the purpose, and that was our prioritized capital list at the time.
Was there anything else that they asked for that we didn't give them? I thought that we did. We met with them again. We went and we reviewed it with them. We told them what our priorities were. We explained, at least like the police chief, about the communication system, you know, and why we picked the video system that we did and such like that. I just don't understand what was it that we didn't communicate and what are people in the town worried about on the school committee?
The concern isn't the fact, well, I shouldn't say it's not about communication. The concern is, with a simple vote by the school committee, you can vote for some very significant expenditures to the town's budget, and that have significant impact on the town's budget. And you do that far in advance of the budget being resolved.
Yeah, and it has to go to the town meetings, and the town meetings vote on that. So if it was something that the town didn't agree to or anything like that.
I think it would be better if we worked that out early, and the concern is that you just force it to the warrant. That is the concern, and you can read into that however what you want, but that is a concern. And particularly if we start talking about millions of dollars worth of items, which could easily happen. All of a sudden a new roof needs to be replaced, you take a vote, it's gonna get on the warrant. That's a concern. You're confused.
Yeah, nothing that we've done or put on the warrants.
I didn't say nothing.
Have
I think
ever
it's-
been not informed and agreed with and talked about beforehand. So, I mean, we can put, I guess if a rogue school committee came on and they decided they wanted to build a new school and they put in, you know, $30 million into the budget, I would suppose that budget wouldn't pass.
So one of the concerns, well, one of the items that, and I don't know, again, I haven't been that close to it this year, so I'm speaking from what I'm hearing, is this year it's on the warrant for new repeaters for the radio system for Minichog. Is that fair? My understanding, those costs will be shared by Camden and by Wilbraham. Fair? My further understanding is that expense only benefits Wilbraham. I was told it doesn't have any impact in Hamden at all.
No,
Those
so-
repeaters are for Hamden, for Wilbraham.
No, to clarify, that's a repeater for this building. The problem is that when, I mean, a little bit uncomfortable talking about it in a public meeting, I guess it's okay since it's fixed already.
Yeah.
When administrative staff and police are on campus here prior to the installation of the repeater, radios couldn't transmit from one end of the school to the other. So that is a repeater just so that radios within the building can talk. So that is for,
Okay, I'm not as well versed on that,
Sure.
so I'm not, because I haven't been involved in those meetings, but again, I just think the concern is with the school committee's action, they can force a capital expense to the warrant, and those capital expenses could be significant. I mean, and may not be budgeting in place for that, and so it's a bit troubling. Don? You know,
I guess it's painful to me, I'll have to side with Sean here, that I guess the way the budget, I understand it, our budget or any budget works, is the department comes and make a recommendation, this is what we need, and it goes to the town meeting. I mean, the advisory committee makes their recommendation, they can stand up at town meeting and say, no, we don't recommend this. So I don't, you know, they can negotiate before that, but I guess I don't I guess I don't like the word force it to the town meeting. I think it's, you know, they're asking for to be put on the town, it's on the town meeting ballot, they're asking for the town to vote for this, the town to vote yes or no, the finance committee or advisory committee can say no, the select board can make a recommendation, no.
Well, it's a demand. It's effectively a demand. I mean, it's.
Well, but every department's the same.
Oh, no, it's not, because those numbers don't, just because the department asks for it, doesn't mean it gets on the warrant. That goes through the town, that goes through a process in our world, it goes through the finance committee, and what the finance committee votes gets on the warrant, not with the town, not with the department requesting.
The select board doesn't control the warrant?
No, well, the select board controls the warrant, but the finance committee controls the budget, and their numbers get put on the budget. Their numbers get put on the warrant, I should say. The select board, it's not the select board's budget. No.
I thought it was a law that the departments, whatever they request, their request gets put on the.
Oh, no. No.
Then how come our number every year is put on, whether you guys approve it or not, you do have to put our number on?
That's exactly what I'm speaking to here.
Yeah, you have to put that number on.
That's exactly what I'm speaking to here. That's why I'm wrestling with the capital part of it. Because whatever you vote will show up on the warrant.
Right.
At some level. Now, there'll still be a finance committee recommendation, but it will, at some level, it will appear.
Well, so the finance committee, we put out a warrant for how much we wanted for our budget, and the finance committee decided that they didn't want to pay $150,000 of that. So they took that $150,000 out of that budget. And then we were forced to go back and we were forced to find another way to come up with $150,000 to give so that we could make this work, and then their piece to Hamden as well. So I don't understand what power you don't think you have, because this year you did it, last year you did it, the year before you did it, you changed the number to be whatever you wanted.
We've never changed the number to be whatever we wanted. Whatever you voted has been appeared on our warrant by law. Now, there is also a finance committee recommendation as well, yes.
I think they put both on the warrant, right?
Yes.
So,
Ideally,
So what do you
ideally
mean
those numbers
putting both
agree.
numbers?
Ideally, those numbers agree,
Yes.
yes.
let me ask you,
We're going around in a circle here, I think, I'm not sure.
how would you do it differently? Okay, so the building needs repeaters. How would they bring it up and say you need repeaters, it's $50,000?
We have a pretty,
It was 12, I believe.
I mean, again, I'm only speaking for Wilbraham, but we have a process where departments make requests in capital planning about, here's where our requests are. And we go through the budget, and I should say capital goes through the budget, and they approve things, or they don't approve things, or they move things around. And then it goes to finance, and it's all voted on.
Okay, so.
I would prefer to keep that process in place.
This particular year, for the Wilbraham Middle School, they had a $700,000 ask for univents. It went to the capital committee. The capital committee said, no, we don't think you should do that because it was only soft numbers, whatever. It went to the finance committee, and the finance committee said, no, and it's not on the town meeting warrant.
That's right, because it's a town-owned building. What we're suggesting, what I'm saying here for Minichog, and in the future, if the middle school becomes regional, those numbers would be forced, you don't like that word, will be on the warrant by virtue of the school committee voting on it, and it will bypass our capital planning process.
But we went through the capital planning process with all of those asks.
I'm really
Can we
not
understand?
trying to be argumentative here. I'm trying to say there's concern at the town level over this.
Are you maybe suggesting that maybe there needs to be more communication or collaboration and working through and kind of discussing those numbers more comprehensively as we approach?
The concern is that with the school committee could just say, I'll just use something. We want the bleachers, and take a vote, and it's on the warrant. That's the concern. That's as simply as I can say it. I mean, I'm not saying it's right, wrong, or indifferent. That's the concern.
But couldn't, conversely, the school committee say we're going to hire a psychologist for every building, and we're going to increase the number of teachers by 40%, and put that on our budget as well. And if the town is like, hey, listen, this doesn't fit, and then it won't get passed. I mean, we've been working really collaboratively with all the departments to try to make sure that we're on the same page when we present something. Yes, like I said, we could ask for $100 million for the school committee budget, but that won't get passed. So why would we put that through? We need it to get passed, because if it doesn't get passed, there are things that happen, a 1/12 budget and such, and catastrophic to, I think, the school committee and one of the few jobs that we are responsible for by law.
So you don't have to agree with me, but I'm just expressing concerns that the town has over forcing certain, particularly capital requests, because they can be significant dollars. And by taking a vote, it gets put on the warrant. That's making people uncomfortable. We really haven't had to deal with that in a long time because of the situation with Minichog, when we didn't have to deal with it regarding the middle school. It's only going to get worse is not the right word, but it's only going to get more magnified if we bring the middle school on as a regional middle school. And Minichog is getting older, those numbers are going to increase more dramatically, and the potential for concern will become larger. So if there's a way we could remove those capital costs from that and go through the normal process, and I understand we have a different process at hand, so that maybe complicates it further.
I would just go back to what I said. This agreement has been in place since, I think, 1956. The school committee in that entire time has been charged with both determining capital costs and operating costs. And I think that's because under the law, that's their jurisdiction. I don't think they have the authority to cede that to anybody. I mean, we can talk about what processes could happen prior to the vote to try to make sure that there's better alignment, but I don't think you get an agreement passed by the commissioner that says the school committee is not going to name the capital costs of the schools.
It's what the school committee is charged to do. It's what our obligations are. If they want to change that, I think it's a big systemic constitution maybe, or at least state constitution amendment. Can we move on, please?
I was just going to say, I think that was a nice segue actually to discuss the most recent meetings between both select boards in Hamden and Wilbraham. Or not.
No, I would like to hear what has been discussed and where we're leaning, if we could.
I know I presented at the last school committee meeting about their meetings, and I know their next meeting is scheduled for April 22nd, but I don't know if there was anything that you were interested in sharing regarding your respective board, your individual boards. Any comments or?
Feel free.
The positions right now, we proposed a framework of whereby, let me get it correct here. We proposed a framework whereby we would pay upfront costs. Let's say it's $100,000, and the project was a 10-year life. We would pay upfront costs, and then it'd go down by $10,000 a year. And let's say year 8 the building closes or something else happens, then we would get refunded the $20,000, from the 2 years that are remaining.
So you're basing value on depreciation?
No, because if you do depreciation, if I remember from my apartment houses, if you do depreciation, you have to have a value of it at the end, and that would actually add to the payback. But we can work that out. But anyhow, we recently received a letter from the Wilbraham Select Board. They would like to stay with the 80-20 split, make it a regional school instead of the 80-20 split. They suggest that we would have a 50-50 vote. We could deny, if there's a capital project, the town could vote no on the capital project. Our position right now is that we don't need it. We don't need a 50-50 vote. If we just leave it the way it is, then Wilbraham could make all the decisions about capital and they could pay all the costs. That's where it stands right now. We were to have a meeting on the 22nd. The board, we just got the letter on Monday, and so we decided to cancel that meeting, and we'll meet at a later time, convenient for both parties.
Yeah, I think, it got proposed, I think at the first meeting, Don, around the idea of capital getting some return on the investment, and if that the school closes sooner than we would anticipate. I think that's been received well by Wilbraham. I think some of those devils are in the details, frankly, but I think conceptually, I think in principle, that makes sense to us. I don't foresee us closing that building anytime soon, largely because we have an MSBA project already in place, and we have some potentially future ones coming up, so I don't see that as being any issue. I think the one area where there is some level of concern is, I think, around items being grandfathered in. And I think Wilbraham feels as though that is, by virtue of a town meeting vote, that would resolve that. If they don't feel it's appropriate, then just vote no. So that's, I think, probably one of the bigger discussions that we need to have moving forward. So I think there's been some progress. I don't think there's been, I still think we have some areas we need to address, particularly around the grandfather items, so to speak. Fair? I didn't understand when you were saying you didn't think the 80-20, I don't think I understood what you mean by the 80-20 versus the 50-50 vote.
In the recent communication, and I'm not speaking for the board now, in a recent communication, it was suggested that because the towns would have to vote on it, that would be, we have a 50-50 vote. We have a vote, and we have Wilbraham has a vote, and Hammond has a vote, so it could go either way. And the letter suggested that because it would be an 80-20 split roughly,
In terms of cost. Yeah.
That'd be a benefit to Hampden. We're getting 50% of the vote for only 20% of the money.
Okay. I understand.
But in terms about the grandfather thing, the communication also suggested that the 2017 study was irrelevant. Wasn't relevant to this discussion, and it is, in my view. Not speaking for the board.
And just for clarification, the grandfathered items would be what we were previously calling like pre-existing condition, is that fair?
And the reference was made around, I don't know what the year was, 2017 report, you said? Whatever that was. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So wouldn't this be something like, if I enter into an agreement to, say, rent a building or to participate in the construction or renovations of a building, wouldn't we go through and walk through and say, okay, the furnace doesn't work, so maybe we take that off, or like, and if you're buying a house and you go in, the furnace is really old, you'd kind of say, okay, let's take off a certain amount of money or something like that for that. You'd make them as things that had to get fixed before the agreement would take place. But instead of doing that, I think, is that what the grandfathered is? Does that mean like, all right, so let's say the doors, the front doors, okay? The front doors in this 2017 report said they need to be fixed. They haven't been fixed since then, so we wouldn't want that to be included in something that Hampden would have to share in the payment of. Is that like just so I understand what's going on?
Yeah, the only difference I would say is you're not being asked to buy anything. You're being given something.
Oh, you guys are giving? The middle school is being given to Hampden? I didn't know that. I thought it was
nonstop. There's no charge for them to use the school. There's no, when you're buying a house, you're paying for the house. There's no fee up front for this. You're just being allowed to use the school at no cost.
The school district is paying
a dollar.
Yeah, it's the agreed upon price, the $1 for the school. So
The point is that Hamden, when you reference, when you buy a house, if the furnace isn't working, you typically go back and say, well, we want some money off because of it. I get that. But when you start with $0 at a purchase price, it's hard to ask for money back.
so would that make it the responsibility of the school committee to go and request certain renovations done at the middle school in order for it to be up to a certain level? Is that something that we should, and then add more onto the capital costs? Yeah, I don't know, I'm just trying to,
No,
to think this out.
certainly there will be some capital expenses that moving forward. I mean, and I think part of it is that the capital costs as we move forward only benefit future students, not previous students.
Yes, yeah, of course, capital costs, something that you improve today doesn't help a student.
Doesn't help
yesterday.
doesn't help from.
But let me ask you, but isn't there a cost that the previous students paid for the capital costs that weren't done with the projects that are just sitting there not being financed? I mean, someone's paying the cost and someone's getting the benefit. So I would say that my son, who's at Wilbraham Middle School right now, there are certain issues with the building and stuff that he sees, and he tells me about when he sees them, and isn't he and his generation paying for that?
I don't know how to answer your question. I'm not sure what you're asking. I mean, where are you going?
Shouldn't we have done these improvements?
We would love to do all the improvements all the time. There's a budget we're trying to maintain. I don't think we've not done anything deliberately for any other reason than we have other priorities at whatever time. There's never enough money to make all the improvements in town, and I'm sure Hamden has the same issues as we do. I mean, it's all about prioritizing things. We try to prioritize on a host of different issues, safety, building security, those sorts of things. Do we get through all of them? Of course not. We don't. I mean, it's just the reality of it. So if I had a magic wand, Sean, yes, I'd love to do all of them, but I don't have that magic wand. Maybe you have better ideas.
No, when you were saying that the future, the one who get the cost and not the people who were previous, I'm saying that there's a
Obvious.
cost that's being paid by the students who are now in the building. That's all I'm saying.
I don't want to continue, but it's very, but I will. Like when I argue with my wife. I don't want to continue this, but I'm right. No, the Hamden has a very simple view of this. And the view is that, you know, your position right now is if we do nothing, if the regional agreement doesn't change, you own the building, you pay for everything. Right?
That's what is correct.
That's correct. Okay, so that's position. If Hamden says, okay, you can change the agreement to grades 6 to 12, we're good with that, but we're not going to change that. You pay for everything, still, unless we make it a regional school. So Hamden's position is, why are we going to make it a regional school when we get no equity, we get no feedback from it? Yes, our kids go there, but they go there not because we sent them there, not because we wanted them to go there. The school committee made a tough decision, and I don't want to go back to that, but they made a tough decision. They closed the school, and they had to do something with the 115 or 20 kids, and they put them in the middle school. Right? So our position is, you know, we understand their kids are there. We want to be helpful, but we're not going to pay for things that should have been taken care of, or there's got to be some type of agreement that's beneficial or fair to our town for you know, having our kids there, having our kids brought there.
Yeah, I think it's a difficult situation. I think we put ourselves into a bind here. We should have addressed this years ago.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
did, and we did. And so now, you know, for the last 7 or 8 years, Wilbraham's been paying for these costs.
Well, they haven't been because nothing's been done over there.
Well, that's untrue. We put a roof on it, number one, Don.
Right, and recognizing that.
I mean,
you put a
saying nothing's been done is inaccurate. It's simply wrong.
You put,
It is.
I haven't seen a list yet, okay? And if you did put a roof on it, and you specifically recognized when you put the roof on it, that Hamden would not have to pay for part of the roof. It was carved out. Now, that was voted down, that changed from 6 to 12, at that time was voted down by the towns. But it was recognized by Wilbraham that Hamden shouldn't pay for that roof.
I don't know how Hamden was ever involved in that discussion. We put a roof on it back in 21, I think it was.
In 2016, there was a town meeting warrant on both town meetings changing the regional agreement from the way it is to 6 to 12 at the middle, you know, make a regional middle school, and that they would put a roof on Wilbraham at the time, on the Wilbraham Middle School at the time, and Hamden would not be responsible for that, and Hamden would also not be responsible for other capital costs at the time. Towns voted it down because they didn't want to change the, you know. And then the next year, the school committee closed the school and began transferring the kids over to the middle school. Didn't make, that I know, any of the improvements that were suggested by the feasibility study. No, and it's true. You make decisions whether the doors need to be fixed or the toilets should be fixed or whatever, and that kind of stuff. I understand that, and those things eventually get done. But I think it's important to note that Wilbraham at the time, or the regional school committee at the time, recognized that Hamden shouldn't be responsible for that. It was voted down. Then in 2020, you did the roof yourself. You got an MSBA grant and that stuff. So anyhow, that's for our next meeting.
It is. So, I mean, you know, and we also have to get in front of town meeting and tell the residents why we need to do certain things. And I understand you have the same issues as we do. So we have to make it, I know Don doesn't like the word fair, but we try to make it as fair as possible for all parties to make it make sense, right? And I think we're trying to do that. There's other work to be done, but we've been probably belaboring that right now.
Is a purchase of the building by the school district, is that off the table? Or is that something that could fix a lot of these issues, do you think? It's just a question.
Well, I think it's off the table because unless Hamden wants to pay for it, I mean, I don't know how they'd want to pay for that. I don't think that would be too smart. I mean, we'd have to go through a process of evaluating the cost and the benefit, but I mean, the building was assessed at something like $20 million.
28.
Is it 28? Okay, so I was low. I was giving you a deal, Don.
It was counting.
But I mean, if Hamden wants to come up with, you know, $2 million or whatever the number is, potentially, but I don't think they want to do that. That doesn't seem to be.
Can I just point out something with that? In that scenario, unless you get a cost of zero or an interest rate of zero, you're going to give both towns the debt service on the loan to purchase the school. So I would say that's probably an inefficient way to use the money.
I was talking with someone about a real estate transaction that I do from a while ago where the two parties, because they were sharing a building, one of them held the note for the part of the cost that the other partner had in the building. So let's say in this case, Wilbraham owns 80%, Hamden has 20%. The school committee would buy it for one entity or a trust, however you want to do it. And that 20% would be held as a note by Wilbraham until the point when the building is sold. Then the building is sold, and then that note of, let's say, with $2 million or $5 million, whatever it comes out to be, would then come right off the top and go right directly to Wilbraham, you know, from whatever Hamden would make on the sale of their percentage.
I don't want to speak for Hamden, but from my understanding, they're not interested in buying it.
Okay.
So, I mean,
Just 2 points of information around that last topic and a prior topic. To Mr. Juicy's question about how Minichog is handled, I would direct your attention to item E on page 6. And that basically just says the capital costs for any district-owned assets are apportioned out based on the ratio of students in the foundation enrollment. And then regarding the items from 2017, our department is working on an inventory of repairs of items that were in that original list, which will be available by the end of the month. So hopefully that will help with that conversation.
Does anyone have anything else?
Did you take off the alternative method? Did that come?
No, that's still in here.
I mean, it's very, I just don't think people understand it. I think it's gonna create a lot of work for you and a lot of work at the town meetings, and do we really need it?
Well, there was a strong interest among the planning committee
It was.
of trying to have an alternate assessment method proposed. Now, it doesn't mean that the school committee has to adopt the alternate assessment method in any year. And since it requires the consent of both communities, I would imagine that the alternate assessment method wouldn't be employed unless there was a feeling that it was in everybody's interest to do so. It does-
The one good thing around that, Don, is it can get pretty painful quickly if it starts to become enrollment shifts. And we've experienced it. Emily's been more of a beneficiary of it as of late, but it could go the other way as well. And at which point it would be detrimental to your budget. I mean, it's when the enrollment shifts by 1%, it's notably felt. And that's happened a few times in the last number of years.
Well, as long as we can explain it when we go to town meetings.
So if you average it out, it lessens the impact in any given year.
Yeah, I understand that, but the process would be, if you went to the alternative method, the town meeting would have to vote whether to accept the alternative method. If not, then it would go back to, so you really have to prepare 2 assessments, right?
And it seems like it's almost unfair if you're gonna alternate between one method one year and the other method another year. I mean,
Well, I guess that's my point. If this year it benefits Hamden, I'll work for that. But you're not, and there goes the budget, right?
No,
You know?
yeah, I mean, the way we're doing it, I think, is not as, I just think if you just do the alternative method, then that's better for everybody. But I don't know, that would be my hope.
Give it like a 3-year rolling average.
Yeah, because then it takes out in any given year, it doesn't cause the spike, or it lessens the spike.
And we're sure that we just can't employ the alternative method and have that be our statutory method,
100% sure on that.
even if both towns agree and it's voted on and everything like that?
I don't believe that current voters in the towns can bind future residents of the towns to, waive their right to the alternatives, to the statutory assessment.
Well, you could if you didn't include it.
But it's in the statute.
Wait, say that again?
I said it's in the statute. You can't take out a method that's required to be in an agreement by the statute.
Okay, so we will send an email about our next meeting. We'll wait to hear when you have your joint meeting.
I don't know, later is the next meeting,
We don't set the date yet.
Okay, so we'll wait to hear when your date is, and then we will plan accordingly. Anything else?
Yeah, I just,
I was gonna say, you've been awfully quiet.
well, I'm not an actual member, so.
He's not a member of this meeting.
But actually, my view on this whole thing is a little bit different than financial people. I view placing the univents in that middle school as a health issue. That which delivers fresh, clean air that the students and the teachers are breathing. My perspective as a school committee member is I am going to recommend, I probably won't get passed, I will recommend a budget that I think we have a fiduciary responsibility to give the children and the adults working in those schools a safe environment and not replacing those univents, especially after we lost a week worth of school with a mold in that school. You know, knowing people and having relatives who suffer from asthma, that can be a very debilitating situation. So my view is this is not an investment in bricks and mortar. This is an investment in the children and the adults who are living in these buildings. And I think we have a responsibility, especially if we could, if that's reimbursable by the state's building assistance, that would cut down the cost. And if we didn't get accepted, it wouldn't get done. I don't understand why we aren't going to the state, because now they only fund things every 2 years. And we're in a funding year. And I think passing up the opportunity for the capital investments we need in these schools that would be eligible for assistance from the state, that we should do that. I'm not saying we go forward if we don't get the assistance, but we ought to apply for it and see if the state will help us out, especially on the univent issue. Because I taught in a building where the univents weren't cleaned, weren't taken care of, and it was a mess. And that's a real concern to me. So I just wanted to say that. I know, you know, I've been at the finance committee, and I know that they're thinking about money, but I'm thinking about the human beings living in that building and what we have to deliver to them. And if it's not healthy, it won't be as effective.
So,
We're not going to deliberate on that because
okay,
it's not an agenda item, but we can certainly add that to a future school committee and have a conversation.
do you not want to hear around why it was not approved at capital?
Not that I'm not interested, but I just think it's outside of the scope of what we're discussing. So, may I have a motion to adjourn? So, all those in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay. We are adjourned 6:23 p.m.